Bible, no perfect educational source that teaches us how to be an effective parent. Like sex education, few of us get it when we really need it while we're young and experimenting with it. You have sex, you have your baby, and it's off to the races chasing one experience after another. There are, however, questions to answer and ways of learning that can help parents to acquire skills that are helpful. Let's try not to let our children fall into the cracks of divorce and help parents get through their unresolvable communication issues. I have with me to discuss this, the Solz of parent education, and Solz is an acronym for this young man right here. His name is Bill Solz. He's a psychotherapist, a LCSW, which is a licensed clinical social worker, right? Mm-hmm. And you have a myriad of other titles. You want to tell us some of the other things you are?
Okay, I'm also a credentialed alcohol and substance abuse counselor. I'm also certified in anger management and trained in domestic violence.
Okay, there's an awful lot of things to do. One of the things that when you and I were talking, that it seems like there is no school, as I mentioned in the opening, for parenting. What would you suggest they do? What are some of the things that we could do?
Okay, well, related to there not being a school, basically most parents end up parenting off the seat of their pants. And when I say that, they end up, for the most part, doing what they've experienced as children. They try to copy things that kind of they felt worked for them, or try not to do things that did not work for them. Mm-hmm. And as far as what to do, as you so well suggest, there are no real guidelines. However, there are in the sense that many books have been written over the years pertaining to parenting. Unfortunately, people do not avail themselves of that, and unfortunately, there aren't any mandated parenting education programs or classes.
You know, I'm very familiar with what you're talking about. As a divorce mediator, we spend a lot of time looking at what we can do to help parents get through their turmoil while they're in the midst of a divorce. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that's very obvious is that there is no real consistent pattern that you can develop. And I was always curious, how consistent could you be? I mean, isn't every family different? Isn't that a hard thing to manage, to figure out?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you well state, each of us are individuals. Every family is an individual, and basically, parents have to come up with their own kinds of guidelines in terms of what they feel is going to be appropriate means of raising their children. And with regard to that, I found myself to be extremely fortunate. Many years ago, actually, when my children were 5 years old and 3, I availed myself of a parenting education class, and quite frankly, it just blew me away in the sense that I can tell you, at that time, I thought if there was ever going to be a best father, it was going to be me. I used to be a teacher, a childcare worker. Certainly, I've been a clinical social worker for many years. So I had so much understanding, but one area I did not have understanding in was how to be a parent. So by taking this program, I learned so many things, such as the one area that you're already talking about is the notion of being able to identify acceptable versus unacceptable behaviors. And what may be acceptable for one set of parents may not be acceptable for another set.
For me, as I'm hearing you, I'm going, how could you manage any pattern in education that could work in that area? Because there's so many different types of personalities and issues that pop up. Mm-hmm. And because we're all individuals, we all think about parenting, about our children differently. Mm-hmm. How could you unify that? How could you get that together? Can't be easy.
And it's not. And I think being a mediator, one of the things that you're probably all too familiar with is the notion that couples, when they first meet and they decide on getting married, for the most part, they don't begin to explore how they are going to parent, their children. So basically, things just evolve, and related to the whole notion of differences, there's as many differences, as there are different couples. But these are kinds of things that need to be discussed, and where parents need to get on the same page.
Do you anticipate then that when you're helping a couple, that you can develop a pattern in your own head that would work for them based on your review of them, or is this something that's kind of like a codified methodology you might use that they should learn and absorb? Was one preceding the other? I'm not sure how to describe that.
Okay, with regard to that, I ended up being very much schooled under the aegis of Thomas Gordon, and he had written a wonderful book called Parent Effectiveness Training in Action. It's been reprinted many times over, and indeed that had become my Bible. And one of the nice things about that book, in conjunction with many other parenting books, is he gives you general guidelines that I found extremely helpful for myself. And over the years, while I've been conducting numerous parenting workshops in the school system where I worked and in my private practice, I've indeed followed those guidelines. For example, the notion of acceptable versus unacceptable behaviors. That's something that each set of couples would need to define and identify for themselves. For example, there's the whole notion of flexibility, and when I think of working with children, parenting children, we need to be sensitive to many different aspects. For example, if we look at a child's behavior, is their behavior appropriate in terms of time? For example, maybe you have a child who's gung-ho about playing the drums, and you're excited about the fact that he's has such enthusiasm and such interest in his playing the drums. However, my guess is, if he's playing the drums at 6 in the morning on Sunday, you're not going to be quite that excited. So there are certain kind of guidelines that you're going to establish when it's appropriate for him to play the drums. In that respect,
there's the other parent that you have to size up and get together with to make that determination first, right?
Exactly. And the same thing would pertain to location. So let's say you have a budding soccer star on your hands, and he's 5 years old, and he's loves the sport, and he's actively kicking the ball. That's all well and good if he does it in the park. However, if he's using your couch as the goal in the living room, my guess that you would find that inappropriate. So you need to kind of determine what those guidelines are going to be based on time, place, based on your children. So your children have different skill sets, different age levels. What may be appropriate for an older child may not be appropriate for the younger one.
But what I'm hearing is that you're telling me of some of these things that you have to come to grips with as a person, but I'm not hearing that there's another person in the room, the wife or the husband, the other party.
Yeah.
So you're really asking, you're going through like an educational process here. You're really telling them, in a sense, as I see it, that this is what they need to be unified on. Am I right?
Right.
Okay.
And but even with regard to the notion of unification, there is just so many variables where children will also understand that maybe certain things can fly by, they can do more easily or readily, or maybe their father is going to be a little bit more permissive of than the mother. And again, it's related to individual differences. And but in general, there has to be some kind of consistency and some kind of meeting of the minds. But and that only comes about
let's say
through
it doesn't
discussion.
Happen. Well, okay. So let's say in the discussion that they have over The drums, because that's obvious.
Yeah.
That's going to pose a problem both in time and in when somebody else is doing something around. One parent, as you suggested, was happy with it. The other one doesn't. Not happy with it. How does you're not telling them basically how to communicate. You're telling them they should communicate.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there any how-tos?
Oh, between the parents themselves?
No, between that's something they have to unify on. When you're working with the couple, I'm talking about what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how do you address the differential? Is it possible to address the differential?
Oh.
I'll tell you, I do the same thing in a way in my mediations, but
Yeah.
but I'm going to tell you, in my case, I don't usually say very much. So I think you're in a different role. As a mediator, we wait to hear how something is developing before we get to it.
But my situation is very much the same, in the sense that, and by the way, I'm trained in mediation as well. But so as you know, the key aspect is being able to listen, being able to understand
Right.
where each party is coming from,
Right.
and then being able to help guide them in terms of coming to some kind of agreement.
The answer, I think, is somewhere lost in the word facilitation, because the way that I would describe how I would facilitate that is to wait for the opportunity. Mm-hmm. That's somehow a facilitation in kind of a hidden way. But aren't you trying to develop a way to teach them? Isn't this a form of teaching?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right.
And I should also say to you, Chris, that for the most part, when I find myself conducting parenting workshops, I'm only meeting with one parent, and it's very rare that I have a situation where both parents end up participating. And there certainly are times in my private practice where parenting issues will be discussed with both parents, but and certainly there's tremendous value in that.
One of the principles you gave me to look at was the inconsistency principle. What does that mean?
Okay, well, that pertains to the whole notion of flexibility, with regard to aspects of time, location, with regard to taking into account differences in age and skill level of children. Because I started to say earlier, it may not be appropriate for your 5-year-old to be staying up till 11 o'clock at night, but when that is okay for your 15-year-old. So that would pertain to inconsistency. Okay, another aspect also, which I think is very important to take into account, is the notion of taking into account the parent in terms of how the parent feels, or another family member. For example, maybe there's a family member who's
a grandmother
very
living
ill.
in the house or something.
Yeah, and maybe having the radio or some other sound system on at a lower decibel level would be more appropriate if that other family member isn't feeling well.
I'm trying to access a place where I can get a pattern of teaching. Mm-hmm. You're talking about most of these things in terms of what the definition of them would be, right? That's what I'm thinking. And what I think if people viewing this program are going to also want to know the depth of what it actually is. How does it manifest to them? So you're saying to have them be time conscious, have them be more unified in decision-making process, and things that are like that. Okay. That would help. It help their parenting.
Oh, absolutely,
right?
and also another very key aspect is what I would refer to as problem ownership, and what problem ownership speaks to is the notion that being able to identify who's having the problem. So, for example, sometimes we see our children as experiencing sadness, anger, some kinds of upset, and it certainly behooves us to be able to understand who's having the problem.
Right.
Is it something that is related solely to the child, for example? maybe something happened with his siblings, maybe something happened at school. And so when a child is experiencing a problem, there's a certain set of skills that very much would behoove a parent to utilize.
Regarding the listening skills you referred to, that's iMessaging is one of the components?
Okay, so for example, when a child is experiencing a problem, for that matter, when you're experiencing a problem or anybody else, for the most part, we have a tremendous need to be listened to. So those would be the kind of guidelines I would suggest to parents, is to utilize listening skills.
Totally get that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the thing you referred to before as iMessages, those are very effective when the parent is experiencing the problem. For example, if your child is leaving their clothing strewn all over the living room floor, hey, that ends up being your problem, especially when you know that you're ready to entertain that evening. And so rather than resorting to negative verbiage with your child, you'd be much better served by saying, hey, I'm annoyed when you leave your clothing all over the living room floor, because it doesn't look appropriate, especially when I'm ready to entertain. And I'd appreciate that you just put it away. Mm-hmm. So by giving an iMessage, you're communicating how you feel. You're also communicating to them.
Personalizing it, that this is what's happening to me, and this is what I hear, and this is what I'm saying.
Right. And all too often, other people would end up getting involved in using negative messages, which I would refer to as glob terms. You lazy slob, pick this up. And for the most part, whenever anybody gets a you message, it's already putting them on the defensive.
Yeah, for those people that don't know, it's a very subtle little difference, what he was talking about, and it can make a huge difference when you're trying to communicate with your kids. But it's something probably no one ever really even thinks about.
Right, but also when you get involved with using negative language, for the most part, it amounts to character assassination.
Yeah, well, it's not easy when you're upset,
But this is some of the value of having parents get involved in parenting education programs.
Right.
And which is something that, unfortunately, in this country is not institutionalized, and it certainly should be, and I believe it should be in high school.
It's reminiscent of pre-K before you get married.
Oh,
right?
that would be dynamite. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that, because like we said in the opening, that there really is no school.
Yeah.
And everything is trial and error, running off the seat of your pants. It's a terrible thing to do to a family when you think about it, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Not be prepared.
You know what? If you think about it, we do a much better job of taking care of our new car.
Yeah, that's right.
You know what? We'll bring it to the dealer and have all the computerized.
Oh yeah, you know what? I love the tune-up language we talked about. Tell me, that's basically what you're talking about now.
Yeah. Okay, with for many of us, our prized possessions are our autos, are our cars. However, the reality is, what's really more important to us than our children? And we don't spend nearly enough kind of time or effort in terms of looking to properly maintain our children, looking to properly learn about how to most effectively deal with them, and they're our most prized possessions.
Before you arrived to the studio today, we talked about marriage, and one of the problems about whether you should be or shouldn't be married because the divorce rate is so high. I always felt is that one of the bigger problems, we just weren't effectively communicating. I think effective communication can work almost anywhere you are and almost any relationship you have. Mm-hmm. And at least you could find out if the relationship is not going to work. Effective communication would tell you, you know what, you're out. At least you have some definitive process going on. But I think that would save a lot of marriages if we were able to communicate effectively.
Absolutely.
About it. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I have no problem sharing with you, and this is a big plug for the book, I learned more in terms of listening skills from the PET in Action by Thomas Gordon than I learned in graduate school.
Right. Yeah.
And so I would very much encourage the viewers out there to, if they're not going to avail themselves of a parenting ed program, to at least get that book.
It reminds me of people that go to the voting booth and don't know what they're doing when they get in there. They don't know who to pick. I think we shouldn't go into the voting booth without knowing who we're electing. We also shouldn't go into a marriage with having children not knowing what we're going to do when they show up.
Yeah.
We have about 5 or 6 minutes left. Maybe you can catch me up on some of the other things that you do that you might want to import, like some of the stress reduction. What's happening?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I had mentioned to you earlier, parenting's a very stressful job.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many roles that mothers, fathers assume, and indeed single working parents, I take my hats off to them. The demands are tremendous, and as such, the kinds of stress that one encounters is voluminous, at least. So one of the things that I utilize with my parents is, and I certainly look at this as part of my parenting program, is teaching them stress reduction techniques. And you had mentioned havening, and that's a very recent treatment modality, and it's very, very effective in terms of reducing stress very quickly and effectively.
Can you tell somebody what it is a little bit?
And easily. Yeah, as a matter of fact, it borrows from the whole notion of parenting. The person who developed it, Dr. Rudin, he happened to observe that babies in distress were able to calm down through the warm havening touch that their mothers were applying. And indeed, in the havening treatment, havening touch is utilized, where I actually have my clients stroke themselves from their shoulders down to their elbows and the palms of their hand, and then there's certain imagery that ends up being involved, and it's extremely quick acting, very self-soothing. And
what do you recommend? How does the audience get to that? How do they see that so they can understand it?
There's a link you can go to, havening.org, and there's a short video, and you'll be able to see it in action, and you'll also be able to learn more about it. Another treatment that I utilize, and I've been utilizing this for 12 years, and I always used to refer to that as the quickest, most effective stress reduction technique I know, until I learned havening. So, and that treatment's called thought field therapy. And it's easily taught, easily learned. I can tell you that my clients actively utilize it. And what it does is it helps achieve emotional balance for the parent. So when they're in stressful situations, they'll be able to implement any of these strategies and thereby negotiate those issues more easily, and then also be in better shape to deal with their children.
Okay, we have about 3 minutes left. Let's go through like a rapid fire, what FIT believes, and you see if you can help me out. We didn't talk about this. So FIT feels that longer courtships create more learning and are more advisable than shorter courtships. It's a general agree or disagree, and how do you any input on it?
You know what? I think in general, I would agree, but certainly there's room for disagreement because it's related to the quality of the courtship.
Well, it always will be, right? Yeah.
I could suggest to you short courtships could be a lot more beneficial.
I'll go one step further. Marriages that were arranged somehow last longer than ones that aren't, when they don't even think about that. Okay. Believe in slower communication versus soundbite type communication.
Yeah.
I'm glad you agree.
Okay.
Follow-up communication where possible. You come to a solution.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. I think that's very helpful.
Trust is one of the most important things we run up against when a marriage or in a relationship. Men and women tend to be biologically different. what could you suggest, I know this is a reach, but what would you suggest men and women do to help themselves in their relationship, because they are biologically different? We act differently, we talk differently, we're not the same. Yes. Hello.
Okay. So what would I suggest? Well, I think it all goes under the heading of communication. And, for example, it's okay to question your spouse or your partner. Did you understand me in this fashion? Or I'm having a little difficulty understanding where you're coming from.
Okay, well, that's fair. Last minute, anything that you want to promote about your book, your website that you want to talk about in the last minute?
Okay. As a matter of fact, I have a newly redesigned website. It's Stress Solutions of Long Island spelled out, .com. And
you're in Hicksville, Long Island, is that right?
yes,
okay.
I'm in Hicksville, and I've been in private practice. Once January hits, it'll be 30 years.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bill. I appreciate that. Our program has ended today. Maybe we can do another idea of these many ideas at a future date. Thank you very much, Bill.
Okay.
Bill Solz. Societal and political trends are rapidly breaking down the family that once was the cornerstone of our great American culture. At FIT, we know you cannot get this information on your own, so we'll bring it to your TV every week. Of course, we always invite opposing views if there are, and there very rarely are. My name is Chris DiMaggio. Thank you for watching FIT TV, and we'll see you again next week.